Hey folks, this is Jack Martin. I'm the virtual CMO for InsurMark and lead Elite Advisor Group, one of the top FinServe growth consultancies in the United States today. I want to welcome you to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Today, I couldn't be more excited to have David Blanchett, who really is an icon in the field of retirement income. He heads retirement research at PGIM. David, welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we were warming up, I think it's been a minute since you've been on the podcast or joined our audience. So, catch us up a little bit. What's going on in David's world with respect to retirement income and the like?
Well, yeah, the more that things change, the more they stay the same, I guess you could say, right? So, these days I'm at PGIM. For those of you that don't know, PGIM is the asset management company of Prudential. My title is head of retirement research. My role is very similar to my role at Morningstar, where I focus a lot on thought leadership, retirement, with an emphasis on the 401k defined contribution space. One kind of small pivot is that now I am a portfolio manager on some of our investment strategies at PGIM, but I was actually kind of involved in different portfolio stuff when I was at Morningstar. So, still very interested in solving retirement, still kind of coming at it from different angles, and doing research on really anything that kind of interests me. There's no kind of method to the madness about, why I kind of explore the topics I cover, other than I kind of like them or think others might be interested. So.
Well, that's a good place to start. So, lately there's been a little bit of a conversation going on about whether in the United States we're facing a retirement income challenge, crisis, or what would be the third option? Struggle. There we go. So, what's your view? Where do you land?
I think nuance is really important, right? I think that there's this retirement crisis camp that I don't necessarily agree with. Now, an important caveat with all this is that we all define crisis a little bit differently, right? For some people, if one American out of, the hundreds of millions of retirees, whoever it is, isn't in great shape, they might call it a crisis. Others might say, well, we need to see kind of some large systematic problem. And I think from my perspective is that, while it's true that Americans need to save more, and that most Americans don't have the savings we'd like to see them have to have the same level of income when they retire. I think challenge is a better word than crisis, because we have, public pension benefits like Social Security. If you look at polls of retirees, they are overwhelmingly a pretty happy bunch. And so I think for me, there just isn't, data to support this notion that retirement really is this kind of, hot mess of bad outcomes where most retirees aren't doing well. To my earlier point, I think there are things we can be doing to kind of help ensure that those who are retiring experience better outcomes. But I'm more in the retirement challenge camp versus the retirement crisis camp.
So, does that depend a little bit on where you are with respect to fundedness and where you sit? I mean, I imagine someone who maybe isn't quite in as solid a position as someone who's maybe more high net worth and has accumulated a significant amount of money might have a different perspective on that, right?
Well, I mean, I think everyone has different perspectives on where they are and how they're doing, right? I think that for better or for worse, we are a nation of choice, where other countries, I think there's been a collective movement globally towards defined contribution plans, so 401ks. Now, who you cover in these plans and how much you save is very much up for debate. So other countries, for example, mandate employer savings in defined contribution plans. I don't think we're going to do that. Right. I think that, that mandated savings, mandated employer contributions is unlikely. And so fundamentally, each person, each household gets to choose. And for better or for worse, I think that a lot of people choose not to save for retirement. Now, that's not to say they're making the wrong choice. If rent's due, you've got to pay that first. But I think that what we are seeing, though, is that more Americans are making better choices around saving for retirement, especially those who have access to a 401k or defined contribution plan. I think that, kind of one of the number one things we see in terms of outcomes for retirement is making it easy for someone to save for retirement. And so the more we see in terms of, state plans, different ways to automatically enroll participants, I think the better we're going to see in terms of outcomes around retirement. But it still requires this level of personal choice that, not all Americans get into because it's not fun to save for retirement. It's much more fun to go on vacations and do things like that. But retirement's obviously very important. And so saving for it needs to be easy. And the easier we make it, I think, for folks, the better outcomes we're going to see on average.
So the accumulation facet is one thing, but then there's the question of how do you provide the income that you're not going to outlive, right? And so I heard something the other day. Someone was talking about some new research that was being done, and that they had a focus group of women, and the focus group, the women essentially had no concept of longevity risk
Right.
and really didn't care about longevity risk, which is a little scary to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there some of that that's floating into this perception of how they sit with respect to their retirement outcomes?
I think that the problem with retirement, and this is directly tied to what I just talked about, it is defined contribution plans, right? I think that 401ks make a ton of sense if I'm an employer, right? I just don't think if I ran a company, I would want to hire someone who is 30 years old. They work for me for 10 years and they leave when they're 40. And then when they retire in 25 years, I have to start paying them a benefit that lasts for their lifetime. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And so we're kind of moving into an era where most Americans have to save money and then use that pot of money to fund their retirement. Well, that's a really hard thing to figure out. You don't know what the markets are going to do. You don't know how long you're going to live, and that longevity risk component, I think, to me is it is the biggest uncertainty, right? If you knew how long you were going to live, the retirement math would be a lot easier. And so the problem what we're having is that as more and more folks get to retirement, they have this big bucket of money and they don't know what to do with it, right? They don't know how to effectively deploy it to kind of create the best possible outcomes in retirement, where the biggest risk they have to face is longevity risk. And there are ways you can kind of actively minimize or eliminate that risk, by delaying claiming Social Security, by buying an annuity. But there's very different perceptions among both advisors and households about how to do that. So I think that we need to kind of you know bring back some of the perspectives on retirement that utilize defined benefit plans, knowing that it's going to be personal savings and choices that households have to make to pensionize their savings so they can better enjoy retirement.
So the longevity risk piece, obviously is based on your perception. I guess your reaction to that is based on your perception of longevity, right? And so I think what I'm seeing from our clients, what I'm hearing from some of our advisors is that we're starting now to personally experience that longevity risk. So with my parents, my dad's going to be 94 next month. My mom is 91, and so that's a long time now. As I start to say, okay, so I mean that's real to me.
Right.
And so I think there's some of that happening in the marketplace today where folks are starting to say, maybe I do need to think about that a little bit differently. What do you think?
I do. So I think that one, longevity risk is very personalized, right? So if we think about the odds of living to say age 95, that's very different if you're a healthy non-smoker versus an unhealthy smoker. And one issue that I've seen looking at some data is that advisors are not personalizing estimates for longevity for clients. I think that it's really important to give a client a very objective kind of science-based estimate of how long they're going to live. Because to your earlier point, people on average are not very good at estimating how long they're going to live. If you look at surveys, younger retirees, so those who are 65 years old, they persistently underestimate how long they're going to live, right? What happens though is as you move through retirement, that changes. Then we start to overestimate, in our 70s and 80s, how long we're going to live. So people left to their own devices are not very good at figuring out how long they're going to live. And so let's just say that theoretically, the average 65-year-old thinks they're going to live 20 years in retirement, right? That perspective, if not addressed directly, is going to radically affect the strategies the person wants to use in retirement. So I think providing clients a very good information about how long they're likely to live is kind of foundational for a retirement income plan. Because if you show someone, hey, right now the average, so we have a married couple age 65, male female, they walk into a financial advisor's office. These folks are not the average American. They tend to be healthier. There's about a 50% chance that one of them could live more than 30 years in retirement, right? That is radically different than the average American that only has about a 20% chance of one of those two people living past, 30 years. But I think the key really is helping people understand what their risks are. And then you can design strategies to address that. But in the absence of that education, people won't understand why that protection can be so valuable.
I couldn't agree more. I think we've undereducated our clients about that subject. There's a nugget you dropped. You said you'd looked at 32,211 financial plans. That's a really specific number. And 70% of the projected, end of life situations were based on age 90. And that
Right.
was, it was the same for male and female. So do you want to speak to that for a second?
Yeah, like I don't want to say that advisors are lazy, but I got a really unique data set of assumptions that were used in this financial planning software. And, to kind of summarize the assumptions, they were kind of appalling, right? So, as you noted, about 70% of the kind of retirement end ages, the effective death age for the plan was age 90, and another 20% ish was age 95. Okay, like to me, what was really troubling was the fact that advisors were using the same age for males and females. And I think most of us know that women live longer than men on average by between 2 to 4 years. So if you're assuming like age 90 for a male, like at least use like 92 for a female, right? And what was more troubling, I think, or just maybe was that advisors would use the same age for both spouses. And why that is problematic is, age 90 was the most common retirement age. Well, you have a married couple that comes in age 65, male female. If you're using 90 as your end age, there's about a 70% chance that one member of that household would live longer than age 90 right now. And so you are kind of radically underestimating how long retirement is going to last. And so I think that what this kind of gets to me is that advisors, need to be educating their clients about how long they're going to live, and then revisiting that assumption regularly in their financial plans. Because how much I would tell someone they can spend in retirement, to my earlier point, is very different if you are a healthy non-smoker versus an unhealthy smoker. So I think the key here is just expectations, right? If you are very healthy, very wealthy, you're going to live a lot longer. And the choices that you should make about your strategy are very different than maybe say the average American. So the key here is kind of providing that right framework to clients to help them understand how long retirement's likely to last for them, acknowledging that there's a lot of idiosyncratic risk here. Like people are going to pass away when they're 75 and some at 105. But what we can see the trends, and the trends are that folks are living longer, and that education about each person's retirement is, I think, required.
Yeah, 100%. And the one of the hidden factors there, in my opinion, is the increased cost for healthcare and
Right.
the risks of cognitive impairment that you start to look at. You say, all right, so my life expectancy is longer. Maybe it's 97, 98, 99. Okay, so what that means is you're going to have a whole lot more years where you're going to be exposed to that healthcare expense risk as well as the risk of cognitive impairment, right? And so it's not just going to be that last moment, that last 24 months, between age 88 and age 90 in the examples that you found, but rather, it could extend for a while. And that again really influences, your view of how your retirement plan is going to work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a pretty good answer for longevity risk, like buying an annuity. Right. I think that's a really good hedge if someone wants to say, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I want to create income that kind of covers me. And I don't know that there's great answers today for healthcare risk, for long-term care risk. I know that there's insurance policies, there's annuities that have riders, but I'm sure that anyone listening, has a client or knows someone that's seen a significant increase in their premium for long-term care insurance. And I think that it's really hard to plan for because the risks are so idiosyncratic, and it's really the type of risk that I think we need like a Medicaid premium or just a better public option. But again, to your point, the longer that you live, the higher the likelihood of having these long-term care events, and so it requires addressing them in a financial plan, because the risk of that is very different if you say plan to age 90 than age 100. Because if you tack on a $100,000 a year expense at age 97, that is a very different type of financial plan than saying, oh, you're going to pass away at 90, not even have to worry about long-term care risk.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's not like we don't have tools to estimate longevity more accurately, right? I mean, Society of Actuaries has this thing, I think it's called the Longevity Illustrator, and it doesn't ask a lot of questions, but one
Right.
of them is, do you smoke? And so, I think that, that at least can get you closer to being in the ballpark than say, just taking the default answer, right?
Well, and like that's actually my go-to tool. I'm maybe I'm lazy. There's lots of free online calculators today that can give you some guidance on how long you're going to live. Right. Some of them are like 50 questions. Some are more than that, and it doesn't take that much to get a kind of a decent starting point. So if you look at the Longevity Illustrator, it asks you, for example, like when you're going to retire. And why that's important is that the length of retirement for someone who retires in say 30 years for a 65-year-old is going to be longer than someone who's retiring today. There's this idea of improvement. People are living longer. It also asks about kind of your health state. It asks about whether you smoke, and those are kind of the key variables that kind of drive how long you're going to live. So I think that like every advisor for every client should at least start there as an estimate for how long retirement is going to last. Now, there's other tools out there too that can offer increased guidance on how income and how activity levels affect how long you're going to live. But the key is just not saying, hey, I'm going to assume that all of my clients live to age 90 and stopping there. It's really giving clients guidance based upon better information using these freely available tools that exist today online.
So you're an economist, and you also have a portfolio manager on your resume now. And so how do you look at where an annuity fits in the portfolio? How should I, as an advisor, be framing that conversation with my client? How should I be thinking about it in terms of allocation, that sort of thing? What are the drivers there for me?
So I've been looking at the potential value of annuities. I mean, let's call them lifetime income strategies because the A word is a bit loaded. And annuity is, to be honest, it's the most difficult word in the financial lexicon because they do so many things now, right? There's investment products, there's income products, they're fixed, they're variable. When we focus just on lifetime income, I think that there's kind of two ways to think about, or at least two ways, how they can improve a retirement outcome. I would say most of the research is more of an academic exercise demonstrating that the more that you allocate to an annuity, the more that you can spend. Right? When you pull this risk together, it on average improves outcomes. I think that's pretty straightforward and widely agreed upon. And so I think that one, I could kind of say, hey, you should do this because it improves the efficiency of a retirement strategy. And I don't know that that always resonates. I think advisors don't agree with it, whatever else is. I think that, to be honest, though, it's the behavioral stuff that's even more important. It's how does your strategy affect how you're going to feel about spending money in retirement, right? And I realize that people have often competing goals when it comes to their savings. They might want to leave a bequest, they might want to spend more. But I've done research with Michael Finca, and it's this under this umbrella of license to spend, and that it's pretty unequivocal that people who have more of their wealth, and wealth is defined as kind of all of your savings and the net present value of lifetime income, who have more of their wealth and lifetime income spend more in retirement. People are more comfortable enjoying what they have when they know they can't outlive it. Okay. And that is a perfectly rational response when you don't know how long you're going to live and you don't know what the markets are going to do. And I think that advisors often say, well, that's my job, right? I help give my clients a plan that incorporates their longevity and the markets list. And I would just say, well, you can't guarantee them anything. Like, you can give them an educated guess based upon what you think is going to happen, but they could still outlive your projections. And I think the one thing that you see from, whether it's Social Security, a public or private pension or a lifetime income annuity, is that these provide guarantees or protection that you just can't get from a traditional portfolio. So trust me, I'm all about building efficient portfolios. I love building efficient portfolios, but lifetime income strategies, annuities, whatever you want to call it, it does something different. And you can't think about the benefit of the strategy through kind of these more traditional portfolio lenses because it solves a problem that a portfolio alone cannot solve. I don't care how efficient your portfolio is. If you live a really, really long time, you just can't do much about that via a portfolio alone. So I think the key is kind of, especially for those advisors out there who are more mathy and more into portfolios, is that you have to view the role of lifetime income, whether it be an annuity or Social Security, through a different lens, because it solves retirement in a different way than you can through a portfolio.
So what this license to spend concept is, it certainly encompasses the lifetime income component of Social Security, right? But what you're talking about is allocating more, incrementally more of their wealth into lifetime income and the behavioral effect that that has, right?
It is. So I've actually got a number of follow-ups I'm doing right now. And so one is a significantly more robust analysis looking at how households deploy their wealth over time. So let's think about what you can use to spend money on. Well, if I'm retired, I'm going to have my assets. I'm going to have qualified and non-qualified savings. So qualified's a 401k, IRA, non-qualified's taxable. I'm also going to have things like capital income, so like dividends. I'm going to have wage income, and I'm going to have lifetime income. Okay, now think about when you're working, it's really easy. You can just spend whatever you make. So wage income will be the predominant driver of what we live off of, right? But as we get into retirement, it becomes really, really complex. You're going to make this kind of series of calculations of how much can I spend off of my wage income, my capital income? How do I draw down my qualified, non-qualified savings? What you see is that people are significantly more comfortable spending, or like consuming is the fancy economics word, money that they receive from lifetime income. And so, whether or not it means to allocate more to it, through delay claiming of Social Security, through buying an annuity, there is overwhelming evidence that the more of someone's wealth that is protected for life, the more they're going to spend in retirement. Right. And this just isn't an advisor effect. If we can isolate households that have certain minimum asset level thresholds, whether it be $100,000, $500,000. Most of these households already have advisors. And so this isn't like, those households don't have advisors. I think it's because people recognize that we're good at spending income. When we transform assets to income, it just becomes an easier decision. I don't have to worry about how long I'm going to live if I have income that's protected for life. And so I think that, again, this isn't a portfolio problem now. It's a consumption problem. And the evidence is just that, strategies that provide that lifetime income protection are a far more efficient way to create income for life than drawing from a portfolio.
So I think that this one of the things that I've taken away from the research you and Michael have done is this notion of how lifestyle impacts their behavior, right? And so the license to spend is really about having a more robust lifestyle, and I think the behavioral research suggests that if you start to frame questions around that, as opposed to here's an extra $200 a month kind of thing, that you end up changing more behaviors. So it's interesting to me how we've kind of come full circle now around this notion. And the other thing that occurred to me when we were talking was that the increase in spending isn't nominal. I mean, it's a pretty significant increase, right? I think there was a number like increased 30% increase causes a doubling of the amount they spend, or some. I've got those numbers wrong, I'm sure, but
Well, I mean, it's directionally, I think that's the key, is that people appear to be significantly more comfortable, spending money that is protected for life. And like just to be clear, like I would never suggest that all of someone's income, all their wealth should be in an annuity, or no, that doesn't make any sense. I think that one thing, my takeaway from the research is that every American should have their essential expenses at a minimum protected for life. And I think what that does is different things. One, I think it is more efficient than doing it through a portfolio, but I think it'll change how someone feels about enjoying their savings. When you know that no matter what happens, you have your essential expenses covered for life, I think that will allow someone the ability to better enjoy and do things that if they have that kind of coverage gap. And so I would suggest that even like Bill Gates, like I don't care who you are, like I think that a financial plan that at a minimum you have that kind of base of protected lifetime income. And I don't really care about the type. A lot of advisors, talk about SPIAs and DIAs and living benefits. As long as it's a high quality product, it doesn't really matter. What matters the most is that a client has that base of income to begin with. And I think why that is such a powerful starting base is it's really easy. You just kind of have someone figure out, you map out all their assets and you map out their goals, like what is essential, what is flexible, and you map those together. And, for better or for worse, I don't want to say most advisors, but many advisors today don't address how income that's protected for life could truly improve that retirement outcome for a host of reasons. So I think that it takes time, it takes conversations, but it takes understanding what that goal looks like and then mapping the most efficient solution against that liability versus just assuming that I'm going to build an efficient portfolio, draw 4 or 5% and call it a day.
Yes, agreed. That clearly isn't landing, for a lot of people. I mean, it's so. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So this has been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any parting gifts for our audience before we sign off?
No, like the one thing that I kind of often get back to is the importance of education and knowledge. I've been in the business for 20, 25 years. I mean, nothing compared to you and others, but I think that the one thing that I've seen is just when I first got involved, I mean, like advisor was analogous with stockbroker. You could have called me a stockbroker, and I would have been like, that's kind of what I do, but I didn't do that. I think that I'm really looking forward to how the profession 20 years from now is transformed into one that likely is providing holistic financial and retirement planning. And so I think that getting education through designations, through reading is just really important, because fundamentally people hire advisors to accomplish financial goals, not to get increased risk adjusted returns. And unless you as an advisor have the technical skill set to understand where and how all these pieces fit together, you're not doing your clients the best job you could be doing. So I just think that knowledge is becoming increasingly important, and that all advisors listening, get your learn on. Take the CFP, take the RICP, take whatever else it is, and don't stop growing, because that's what your competition is doing. And if you're not doing it, I think you're going to get left behind.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So for our audience, what are a couple of things that David Blanchett does when he's not managing portfolios or researching retirement income that might surprise our audience?
Well, I have four relatively young children, 5, 7, 9, and 11. That keeps me very busy. I have a twin brother. I just found out actually earlier this year we're identical. We grew up thinking we're fraternal. We took a test. We're identical. And I'm a runner. I like to run as often as I can. So I stay busy, but I think the kids keep me about as busy as I'm going to be. So.
Long distance running and four young children. Those two things seem to go together. So
Well, a good way to run off some steam, so to speak. It's good alone time, so I enjoy it.
yeah, cool. Hey folks, you can catch up with David. We'll put the links on the page wherever you get your podcast. Please like, comment, share. Please subscribe. On behalf of the Breakthrough Advisor podcast, thank you very much, David, for joining us today. Excellent 27 and a half minutes. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing all of you again next time on the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Thanks.